Good evening, everybody. It's now 7 o'clock, and this meeting of the Finance Committee of January 30th, 2025 is now called to order. A couple of things before we start. This meeting is being taped for future broadcasts, and any public comments will be held to a 3-minute total per person. Tonight, we have the pleasure of welcoming the Department of Public Works, Jamie McGaldy, Superintendent, and Joe Lobero. Did I mess it?
It's close. It's good. Lobeo.
Lobeo. I knew that.
Just like it's spelled.
Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's always good to be here. For the folks at home that don't recognize me, I'm Jamie McGaldy, Public Works Director for the Town of Wilmington. I'm here tonight with our Deputy Public Works Director, Joe Lobeo. And in the audience, again, is our Operations Manager, Jerry Lawrenson. And next to him is our garage foreman, Mike Hardeman. Both Jerry and Mike were instrumental in the creation of the FY26 budget, so we're very glad that they're here tonight. And Joe and I were just doing some quick math today. Believe it or not, we've been collectively in the town of Wilmington for over 35 years now. So it seems like yesterday that we just were the new guys, and time flies. So we handed out the narrative and a copy of the slide deck. You have that to reference. And I'll be taking this time to summarize our proposed FY26 budget, highlighting the major changes between FY25 and FY26. And then at that point, I'll detail our capital plan. After this, Mr. Lobeo will take some time to talk about the water and sewer budget. Please feel free to stop us at any point and ask us questions. The presentation is rather informal. First and foremost, as always, I'd like to express our gratitude to the Finance Committee. We had a very successful 2024, and of course we can't do that without your support, so that's greatly appreciated, and it is greatly appreciated by our staff as well. So getting into it, the DPW is responsible for the horizontal public infrastructure of the town, and our department, of course, consists of 6 divisions: Highway, Parks and Grounds, Tree Division, the Cemetery, Water and Sewer, and Engineering. We're also responsible for the curbside residential solid waste and recycling collection program, which incidentally accounts for a large part of our FY26 budget increases, as Town Manager Slagle stated Monday and Tuesday night. We're also responsible for the maintenance of town vehicles and construction equipment, the construction oversight of permitted site work in town projects and utility construction. So just a reminder, if you have not already, to sign up for our DPW Twitter page. Of course, our official website is kind of our clearinghouse for all information public works related. But our Twitter page serves as an ancillary, kind of a fun tool for us to get creative with, and that's where we showcase a lot of our photos from projects that we completed over the past year. We also have some public service announcement on there occasionally. For instance, we had a few water breaks last week where we posted that. Project updates, we put job postings on there, we announce trash delays, that sort of thing. So if you're not signed up to that, I encourage you to do so. And on the slide here is just some good photos that we've taken over the past year, including one of my favorites, which you'll see quite a bit, our team photo in the middle there, which is on our website. I'm very proud of that one. Also, I just wanted to highlight our first responder campaign again. The DPW again participated in our first responder awareness campaign again this summer by participating in the library's Big Wheels event in June. This is an event where youngsters can come and put their hands on and actually sit in the driver's seat of some of our vehicle investments. Of course, these are the investments that the Finance Committee has been supporting over the years. And so this event was great. This is the first time we actually had a tree climbing demonstration by one of our talented tree climbers in our tree division. That was very well received. And for the 3rd year in a row, we had a Power Wheels giveaway. We have a free raffle at the site for any child who attends can be a part of this. We give away free raffle tickets. This was a donation on behalf of the Wilmington Public Works first responders. So there's a copy of a picture of the truck in blue there. And then following suit in the fall, we also have a holiday gift card giveaway. This is the 3rd year in a row that we've done that. And this is where we go to social media and ask for nominations for needy families who might be in need of some assistance with their holiday meals around Thanksgiving time. Proud to say, in 3 years now, we've raised over $2,600 in grocery gift cards, and we've helped 24 Wilmington families purchase their holiday meals. So now onto the budget. The DPW FY26 budget was prepared with the intent of maintaining current levels of service, which is always one of our goals wherever possible. This year, unavoidable increases are experienced mainly in personnel services and contractual services. And this is attributed to contractual step raises due to several employees, COLA adjustments in salary and divisional overtime accounts, contractual increases in rubbish collection and disposal due to the start of new 5-year contracts, which I'll highlight in a minute, and then the rising cost of repair parts and increases in contracted highway services. So if you flip to page 2 of your narrative, you'll see a copy of this chart here. You'll see the major category breakdowns of our budget. You'll see personnel services has increased by about 7%, and contractual services has increased by approximately 11%. The materials and supplies line item is essentially level funded at 0.13%. And there's an $11,000 increase in furnishings and equipment over last year, which accounts for about an 18.6% increase. Overall, our proposed FY26 budget request is an increase of 7.73%, or $625,928, bringing our total budget $8,722,144. Going into personnel, as I stated, there's an increase in personnel services of $256,826, or roughly 7%. This is mainly attributed to contractual step increases for full-time employees and COLA adjustments in the salary and divisional overtime accounts to reflect 2 years of COLA adjustments from contractual increases, which would be 3% in FY25 and 2.7% in FY26. Groundsman Steve Hunt in Parks and Grounds. He'll be retiring actually tomorrow after 22 years as a member of our DPW, and as such, his vacancy will help offset some of the increases due to step raises and obligatory longevity benefits. There are no new full-time positions proposed this year in our budget. However, if you do look at the yellow item on the screen here, we highlight an increase of $13,000, and that's to fund our part-time position of training and compliance manager as part of the highway seasonal part-time line item. So this is a part-time position which was funded by the salary adjustments accounts this past year, since we created it in 2024 in the summer, and it's necessary for recent changes with the CDL law requirements. Starting in February of 2022, Massachusetts made changes to CDL licensing to require anyone who gets a CDL to be trained by a registered trainer from the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So what that requires is basically 17 hours of road training, 17 hours of range training, and classroom hours in order to get your CDL. That is different from the days past where you did not need a registered trainer to help you get a CDL. And all towns in the state are kind of dealing with the lack of qualified applicants when they're looking for DPW workers. Just finding someone with a CDL has been really hard to come by lately. And then when we do find somebody, they might be a great truck driver. They may have driven, freight trucks their whole life, but they really might not have any good utility construction experience. So finding that mix of somebody who has both a CDL and kind of boots on the ground experience has been really hard to come by. So this increase of $13,000, what this will do is it'll help us utilize an existing employee in the town of Wilmington. Our Director of Transportation for the school department, Lisa, is a registered trainer for CDL. So Wilmington is in a very unique position where we can kind of harness what we already have here. So by giving her a little bit of a bump to help us with our training, we're able to bring her in about once a month to do safety trainings for us. And it means more because she's a registered trainer. And we can also hire the right person for the job rather than someone who is strictly licensed with the CDL. And that way we can give them about 6 months of on-the-job training to try to get that licensing and using Lisa as a trainer. So I do think this is a great opportunity for us. It's short money. If we were not to do this, what other cities and towns are doing is they are forced to hire contracted services on the outside or tell their new employee that they have 6 months to get the CDL on their own. If they were to go to a driver's school for that, that's an upfront investment for them of about $10,000. So it's really hard to find somebody committed enough that's going to put that money up front for them. So right now, this is a system that's working great, and we'd like to continue that. And I'd just like to point out that that $13,000 used to be up 2 lines up in the part-time engineering line item, which we've zeroed out the last couple of years. So essentially, we're just bringing that money back, but directing it to another line. And then I just wanted to state, this is something that I spoke about last year. the cemetery division has not seen personnel growth since we consolidated that department about 30 years ago. We used to have 5 or 6 employees in the cemetery division when it was its own entity. And over a series of years, the DPW absorbed the cemetery division. We've gone down to now 2 employees. And of course, the cemetery is bigger now than it's ever been. Not only that, but our expectations are higher. People are looking for more maintenance on the grounds. There's more monument foundations to build and that sort of thing. So looking at the budget, we know we want to be as lean as we can be. We've decided to defer that request for an additional employee to a subsequent year, but I just did want to bring it up this year because it's still kind of fresh in my mind, and it's something I'm concerned about as we're expanding the cemetery. And really, that does it for personnel services. If there are no questions.
So
Yes.
I just want to be perfectly clear on the personnel services. So this is the situation where last year increases were not given. Is that correct? So you have 2 years?
Yes, as Town Manager Slagle, I think, alluded to this in his
Right.
general presentation. So we were in the middle of a contract negotiation at that
Right.
point. So what you see here is management reflected COLAs going double, and then also what we did in the overtime accounts is we had to double adjust those for basically 2 years of missed COLAs, because if we don't update the overtime accounts, at some point that'll catch up, and we're going to be running out of money in the overtime account.
Okay.
There are any other questions? Seeing none, I'll move on to contractual services. Actually, incidentally, before I do that, is a slide here of Lisa, our training and compliance manager, giving a safety talk to our guys. This is actually our DPW garage. It also doubles as our training room. This is what we have now. We've got a little pull-down screen on the far left, but we make very good use of what we have. Moving on to contractual, as discussed, contractual services for FY '26 experiences an 11% increase from the FY '25 budget, or $356,629. The main factor for this increase is the rubbish collection and disposal line item. But before I talk about that, I would like to actually first discuss some of the smaller adjustments in the contractual services category, which are represented in yellow on the slide. There's a proposed increase in highway contractual to account for rising costs of roadway line striping, which has experienced accelerated inflation over the last several years. These contracted services, as well as rises in costs from other contracted highway maintenance services, justify a request to increase this line item by $15,385, or roughly 15%. There's also some modest increases of $5,500 and $9,000 proposed in road machinery repairs in the town vehicle repair account, to help offset increases experienced from repair parts inflation. This is the result of a projected 7% increase based on discussions with repair part suppliers and vendors, which has been justified by 2 years of experiencing drastic increases in expenses. 10% increases are requested in both tree miscellaneous contractual services and snow and ice miscellaneous contractual, to account for rising costs of contracted services for large-scale removals and winter weather-related contracted services. We've seen climate change affecting both of these accounts. Prolonged dry periods are actually causing a lot of trees that are otherwise healthy to uproot on us, and we've been seeing that change. So what that does is it causes us to have to call our train contractor a little bit more frequently, so I'll be looking to see if we can up that account there. And also, climate change is limiting our supply of snow contractors. The last 3 years now, the winters just have not been as robust as they used to be, and so what we're seeing is kind of a lack of interest for contractors signing up early to get on. So what we're forced to do is be competitive with other towns. So really, the last several years, we've been proposing almost 10% increases in our snow contracted rates. So we did that again this year. We increased our rates by 10%. And so what I wanted to do there is also increase our line item for snow and ice miscellaneous contractual by 10%. So that's why it's from $200,000 to $220,000. Yes, we've only plowed 3 times this year, but there is going to be a time when we need these contractors. The winter's not over, and if it's not this year, it'll be some year soon, where we're going to be relying on these guys quite a bit. And we would just want to make sure that we're ready. And the orange line on the slide is actually our public streetlight account. So increases in the accounts I just spoke about are partially offset by a reduction in the public streetlight account. As savings continues to be experienced in public streetlights from the benefits of converting over to LED streetlights over the last several years, we're comfortable reducing the request in this line item by $12,320, or approximately 8%, to align with historical spending. This account also funds our maintenance of our traffic signals in town, in addition to the illumination of our streetlights. This is the last 10 years of expenses in this account, and as you can see, we've dropped about $40,000 over the last 10 years. So this is why we think we can actually take a reduction in this account this year. We've had some pretty consistently low spending in that account, and again, we believe that this is a result of converting over to LED streetlights.
That's in spite of the fact that your rates are going up, right?
Yes. Yep. So now back to kind of the big ticket item here in green. As the town enters the first year of a 5-year agreement with both Wheelabrator North Andover, also known as Wind Waste, and Casella Waste, the rubbish collection and disposal line item will experience a contractual 12.76% increase, which amounts to approximately $316,564. So that's the result of 2 contracts here, I want to be clear. So first is the disposal contract. The final disposal contract was the result of competitive negotiation process between Wheelabrator Wind Waste and Covanta of Haverhill. These are the 2 local waste-to-energy facilities that are right on the 495 belt. The collection contract, conversely, was the result of a publicly advertised request for proposals, which the town received interest from over 30 entities. Some of those entities were publication companies, but we did actually give out to 30 entities the RFP. We officially received 3 proposals when the process was done, and ultimately Casella Waste was chosen as the most advantageous proposal for the next 5-year collection term. So although we performed our due diligence by participating in this competitive process, we feel the awards are in the best interest of the town. These contracts ultimately account for most of the proposed increase in FY26. So if you look at this slide here, this essentially summarizes our RFP process, and I just want to kind of highlight something down below here. So the first 2 rows, represented in blue on the left, are the overall 5-year cost of the contract over the 5-year term. So we had Casella Waste come in at just over $8 million. Again, this is over the full 5 years. And this line item up that first row is just strictly for collection and transport of trash. It does not include disposal. Waste Management was just over $10 million, and then comparatively, Boston Carding was about $13 million. So we use those numbers, and we have a 5-year comprehensive solid waste budget based on those proposals. So our bottom line item over the 5-year contract term would be $15 million for Casella and just under $17 million for Waste Management. So if you're comparing our first year FY25 to our first year FY26 in our proposed budget, it's an increase of $316,564, or roughly 12.8%. Going through this process, our second lowest bidder, who was Waste Management, was double that delta. So we would have increased our budget 27.8% if we were to go with Waste Management. So I'm showing this to you to just ensure you that we did our due diligence here. It's like really any service that's increasing because of inflation. Trash is no different, but we really feel that sticking with Casella Waste is in our best interest, even though it's an expensive change. This is just a slide that highlights our recycle rate in town. We're still hovering around 27%, and you can see the major jump in 2016 when we switched over to automated recycling. I'd like to go over to materials and supplies at this point, unless there's any questions on contractual services. Okay. Materials and supplies. Materials and supplies account has a slight increase of $1,433, or 0.1%, essentially resulting in level funding. This is mainly attributed to a slight savings in fuel based on the latest 10-year averages for fuel use in the town's vehicle fleet, which helps offset a small request to increase the highway construction supplies line item. The cost of salt for us has remained the same this year at $57 a ton due to a contract extension with the town's salt consortium. Fuel use is relatively stable, and prices have again begun to recede after a subtle climb last year, as predicted. The town continues to experience savings by switching over to fuel-efficient SUVs over the old Crown Vics, of course. And the DPW has held the projected wholesale price of gas to remain at $3.30 a gallon, and the wholesale diesel to remain at $4 per gallon. This results in a slight reduction of approximately $3,300 in the town's two gas, oil, and tires line items. There's an increase of $5,700, or roughly 7%, in highway construction supplies to help offset higher costs associated with asphalt patching and infrastructure maintenance to meet higher outputs. Basically, we're putting a lot more patch down. It's not necessarily because our roads are any worse. We were lucky to receive, through support from you, the purchase of a hot box a few years ago. This is a heated box that's on a trailer. It allows us to transport hot mix patch throughout the town and put that down a lot more efficiently. So the result of that is we have more opportunity to put more mix out. And we're seeing the result in our roadways too. A lot of our roads are getting patched quicker, and we're trying to avoid any sort of liability that way as well. There's also a slight reduction in the tree chemical account of $1,000 as a result of reduced frequency vegetation management applications on the town's roadsides. We just finished our fifth year of our 5-year vegetation management plan, also known as a VMP. That's a plan that we filed through the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. I don't expect this year that we'll be putting any herbicides on the road as part of that. We'll be taking this year to kind of regroup and file our next 5-year VMP. And that's something that's required if any city or town wants to use any sort of herbicide on roadside growth as part of their vegetation management. You have to file a VMP, that's the law. So essentially that does it for materials and supplies. Kind of anticlimactic, but essentially level funded.
One quick question.
Sure.
On the gas and diesel, you quoted prices. Are those prices static for the year, or will they rise and fall as gas and diesel prices rise and
The
fall?
prices that I quoted are essentially our calculation based on a 10-year average of what we use.
So it's not a contracted price?
No, it's a budget figure.
Budget, got it. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions?
The salts, do you purchase that on an as-needed basis, or do you have to contract to purchase a certain amount to
Yeah.
get through the winter?
Yeah, so we're part of a consortium. We try to buy that on an as-needed basis. If we have a really rough couple of weeks putting some salt down, we'll just place an order with the vendor that's on the consortium bid. And essentially, they'll deliver it to us within a day or two. Obviously, if we have a lot more smaller volume snowstorms like we've had the last couple of years. The frequency has gone up for the 1-inch, 2-inch storms. Those are the storms where we use the most salt because we're trying to salt it away. What we're trying to do also is be part of our salt reduction program as well. So it's kind of a healthy balance there. If we get a 10-inch storm, we're actually using a lot less salt than if we get a 1-inch storm.
Thank you.
Any further questions on materials and supplies?
I've just a quick question. I noticed the contractual services, as you pointed out, was largely due to inflationary increases. I think that was back, it was on the printout and yeah. But I assume that most of that is related to cost that goes into those contracts that are contracted out. So I'm more, it's more just interesting that the DPW's materials and supplies themselves have remained
Yeah.
basically zero. Let's call 0.130. Staying the same, but the contracts you're getting are naturally saying that there's inflationary pressure, which is the reality, right?
That's true. I mean, a lot of what you see here, like for instance on this contractual slide, our second line, which is actually our miscellaneous highway contractual, there's some items in there that may or may not actually be controlled under contract. Most of that is our highway line striping. And so that is under contract. It's not so much the inflation per se because of labor. Actually, since COVID, the cost of paint skyrocketed. And so we were in a position a few years ago where we could paint, and when I reference paint, I'm talking about the double yellow lines, the white fog lines. We could paint the entire town in the period of basically the month of April and May under that budget. Last year was the first year that we realized that with this current budget figure, we cannot paint the entire town. So since I've been here, though, that line item really hasn't increased all that much, so it's definitely has been overdue.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, I'll move on to furnishings and equipment. So I'll just go down and list our furnishings and equipment. Again, this is a total of $70,340. We're first requesting $19,500 for the purchase of a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, also known as an RRFB. That is the flashing solar crosswalk signs that you've seen around town. We currently have 7 of these. This would be our 8th purchase. It was a request from the school department to purchase this as part of our FY26 budget. The location of this flashing solar sign would be on Carter Lane at an existing crosswalk, essentially the crosswalk that's between the Boutwell School and the new playground that's just been installed there, so on the, I guess, the south side of Carter Lane. And this would be to help with the migration of youngsters between the West and the Wildwood School now that those, the Wildwood's consolidated over to the middle school. We're also, that's item number 1. Item number 2, we're looking for $12,000 to replace the fire suppression tanks at the DPW fuel island. And that's basically required every 6 years. Item number 3, the DPW is requesting $2,900 for softball clay to help rehabilitate the infield at the high school softball field. This is the practice softball field across from the Wildwood Cemetery on Wildwood Street. When that was built in 2013, it was built with a substrate of essentially crush and run with some stone mixed in. So as we're tilling that, some of the stones are coming up to the surface and it's preventing the softball teams from wanting to play there. So we're looking to do that work in-house, but we do need a couple of $1,000s for some clay. Number 4, the DPW is requesting $84.40 to replace an undersized trailer to transport the new mini wing mower for Parks and Grounds. As you remember, last year, we purchased, through your support, a mini wing mower primarily to help mow the grass at the new Textron fields. And so we're looking for a trailer to help transport that to replace an old one. Item number 5, the DPW is requesting $6,500 to strip, prime, and repaint the vertical uprights at the antique-style traffic signal at the intersection of the Hardin Tavern, which is essentially Woburn Street and Salem Street. So if you've been through there recently, that light actually got installed the year I started, which was 2004. And it was brand new at the time. I guess I'm showing my age here. It's starting to peel. The antique-style traffic signals look great, but when they do start to peel, they're very hard to repaint. So we're looking to bring in a professional to kind of strip it down and repaint it. And this would just be the uprights. I think there's 8 pedestals that would be repainted. Item number 6, the DPW is requesting $8,000 to help fund field irrigation and pump repairs as needed, as annual repairs are becoming a common unanticipated expense. Many of our fields in town are still irrigated with point wells and deep wells. And so if we don't have a line item in here for some irrigation repairs, all of a sudden we'll have a pump breakdown and our operations account isn't really set up to handle a large-scale repair of that nature. And lastly, item number 7, we're requesting $13,000 to install perimeter fencing around the Collier Playground at Silver Lake. So if you recall, the Sean Collier Playground was built at Silver Lake Beach. It's a public playground open to anyone that wants to use it. The problem that's been happening over the last couple of years is during beach season, when the beach is locked and people have to pay to get in, it also restricts the public from using the playground. So what we'd like to do is just install some perimeter fencing around that playground that we will lock from the beach side when the beach is open, so that you don't have to pay to get into the beach to use the playground. You can actually access it from the parking lot. And that does it for furnishings and equipment. Any questions on that?
So, have you considered putting the pump repair into your regular line item in the budget, as opposed to having it a part of?
I have considered that. This would be the second year in a row that we've done this. My strategy there was to wait and see if it becomes a regular expense, because there's really no way to predict if the pump's going to
Right.
break. So if we were to add it to Parks and Grounds miscellaneous contractual, that would be quite a big jump in percentage. So instead of doing that right off the bat, I'd like to try to justify having to do it.
Okay. But like you say, you could look at 3 or 4 years, and you're going to get
Right.
a different year every year.
Yeah, and lately, just with the drought, we've been relying on the field irrigation much more.
Yeah.
And just the nature of groundwater tends to be high in minerals, and it tends to degrade the pumps quite a bit.
Okay, just a thought.
Sure.
I'm curious on the fencing at the playground. The folks who pay to use the beach during the summer are not residents, right? Out of town folks, or do residents have to pay to use the beach?
I believe it's the non-residents that are paying
So
to
it's
get on.
not, so why would we spend $13,000 of resident money so that non-residents can now access it during beach season? If the residents can access it for free, and there are other parks in town, why are we gonna fence it off to make it easier for folks from out of town to come, use the parking spaces, congest that area if the beach is full and the folks from town? It's a town.
Sure. No, it's a good question. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but I think this idea came about because the Collier Playground was done as a gift to the town. And so the people who helped generate the funds to build that playground wanted it to be open to everybody, not just essentially Wilmington residents.
And I'll just add that, and this is kind of an irritant about charging to get into Silver Lake. Sometimes it's grandparents that are coming, like a grandparent that lives in Tewksbury, coming to Wilmington for Wilmington grandchildren, want to take them to the beach. The grandparent has to pay to get in there. So some of the people that are paying really are not that far removed from the town of Wilmington. Not all, but some.
Thank you.
Welcome. Seeing no further questions, I'll move right on to capital. So our capital requests for FY '26 are as follows, and these are either highlighted in your slide deck or right in your narrative. Item number 1, we're requesting $304,000 for the purchase of one heavy-duty 6-wheel dump truck with plow and swappable hook-and-go dump body. There's a picture of our old Highway 24 up on the screen here. It is a 2009 Sterling dump truck. Sterlings are no longer made, so finding repair parts for this truck is next to impossible. It's got a hard 49,000 miles on it, which does not seem like a lot of miles, 49,000 in this day and age, but those are hard miles for a truck of its age, and you can see it's basically rusting out. And I just would like to note, this truck is actually stored, it's one of several trucks that are stored outside. We just don't have the garage space right now to store all of our investments inside. The white truck up on the top left is a truck that we got a few years back. That's Highway 15, so we'll be essentially replacing that truck with the same thing. What's unique about this one is it's a hook and go style. It'll be our second style hook and go, so we do not have to buy multiple bodies like we did the first one with Highway 15. We can actually share bodies with this truck, so it's a little bit less. Yes.
What do you do with the old one?
That'll be used likely as a trade. Item number 2, the DPW is requesting $227,000 to replace the existing Highway 27 sidewalk plow, which is a 2009 Pre-North. It's got over 1,000 hours on it and experienced significant wear and tear in the last 14 years. This is one of 3 sidewalk plows that we have. The plowing of sidewalks has become extremely significant in our snowstorm events. We do it a little bit different than some of the other cities and towns. We have 3 high-speed V-plows. These V-plows also have snowblower attachments. What a lot of other cities and towns are doing is taking several days to clear their sidewalks with snow blowers. They're done a little bit neater, but it does take several days. I think the folks in town are kind of used to, when they see the sidewalk plows going out, it kind of tells you, all right, the storm must be close to ending. I have a lot of respect for the guys that drive these because it's the same people that are driving a plow truck for 10 or 12 hours. They get out of that truck and then they're in this for another 4 to 5 or 6. They love doing it. They can put the radio on and kind of listen to tunes as they go. But it is a specialty
go.
piece of equipment, and it's almost $250,000. So if we want to keep up the current level of service with our sidewalks, this is a necessity. And incidentally, we've spent $23,000 in repairs in this vehicle since 2014. We have a really great and robust maintenance program. Our tracking is not glamorous. It's actually a series of Excel spreadsheets. We've looked at software for this, but we always go back to the tried and true Excel spreadsheet, and it's becoming very handy when we're doing some planning like this. Item number 3 is a $127,000 request for the purchase of a new 3/4-ton body pickup truck to serve as the mechanic's road call truck. This vehicle will replace existing Highway 4, which is a 2007. It's a vehicle with 97,982 miles on it. So this truck is heavily relied upon. It's essentially our medic vehicle. This truck goes out whenever there's a breakdown in our fleet. It looks really nice because it's maintained by mechanics. These are the mechanics' truck, basically. But don't let it fool you. It's aging, and it's essentially our ambulance truck to service all of our other vehicles, including police and fire trucks. If this truck goes down, we will not have the ability to service our other emergency vehicles. And it's also a tad undersized because hauling around the compressor and some welding equipment in the back has proven that we need something with a more heavy-duty chassis. Item number 4 is a piece of new equipment for us. We're requesting $87,000 for the purchase of a new heavy-duty mini excavator for the Highway Division. So this would be our second mini excavator. The one you see in this photo is actually a mini from the Water Division. What we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years is sharing this piece of equipment between divisions, which is not bad at all. But now because we're reducing frequency doing chemical applications to our roadside spraying, we're doing more mechanical applications using a flail mower. So the photo on the right is our mini equipped with our flail mowers. This goes out in the summer pretty much every day, but at the expense of not using it for the Water and Sewer Division, which is really what it was intended for. So if we have a water main break or a service break, we need the mini. We're not doing roadside trimming. The piece of equipment is extremely versatile, and I think it really behooves us and benefits us to have a second piece of equipment. Anything you want to add, either of you guys, about this? Good? Okay. Item number 5, we're requesting $23,000 to replace the existing John Deere Gator cart that was donated to the DPW back when the high school was completed around 2013. It's a utility vehicle. It's used by our cemetery and our Parks and Grounds Division. Essentially, it's the vehicle that helps pull our groomer for our synthetic turf field at the high school.
Do you also use that for the Yentau?
We actually have another one dedicated just for Yentau. That's a good question. Items number 6 and 7 are on one slide. We're requesting, again, $60,000 for this year's phase of development for the Wildwood Cemetery. This project funding will allow for various upgrades in the cemetery, including pavement repairs and phased resurfacing, some landscaping improvements, phased monument footings in the new section Q, and some guardrail repairs. So what we've been doing, about 5 or 6 years ago, this used to be called the Cemetery Expansion Account. And our expansions in sections N, O, and P are essentially complete. There are some finishing touches to do there. Then we expanded into new section Q, which was the site of 64 Wildwood Street. And so what we're doing is we're using this money to phase improvements over there. So if you've noticed, the burials have already begun in that new section Q. But what we're doing, 2 a year, as represented on the first photo on the top left here, we have to install monument strip footings before any headstones can go down. And that's a rather expensive process. We are doing that work in-house, but the concrete is very expensive. So we're trying to do that rather than do it all at once. We're doing about 2 a year, and we're just far enough ahead of schedule so that the burials are happening in the rows that we did maybe last year. We're also using a big portion of this money to help resurface our roadways in the cemetery, which have really been neglected over the last several decades. So this past year, in the fall, we paved Magnolia Ave, and we plan to do additional paving in the spring with the leftover money.
How long do you think before you fully have that developed?
Section Q?
Q.
Well, it's developed and ready for burials now, with the exception of headstones and most of it. So the first 2 rows are headstone ready. We're probably not going to be exhausting those first rows for another 2 years or so. And so that's why we're kind of phasing improvements there. Every couple of years, we'll do an additional set of rows for headstones. All told, we've got about 10 to 12 years left on section Q before we completely fill it with burials.
And how many headstones would be in there?
There's-
If it was fully,
There's 374 two-grave lots in that section.
You didn't even look down at your notes.
I've been here too long.
it's a machine.
That's I gotta tell you. I was watching your eyes the whole time. He didn't even look down.
So item number 7 is our NIPD's general permit services. This is a recurring cost that you've seen in years past. This year, it's increased to $75,000. And just as a side note, it'll likely increase to $100,000, if not next year, the year after. So NIPD stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. This is essentially our permit that we maintain in order to drain our stormwater in town. So this is something that's relatively new over the last 10 years or so, as far as new requirements. So the EPA in the state has released a permit. We're currently working off the 2019 permit that requires dry and wet weather stormwater sampling, which is reflected in the gentleman here taking some samples. Also, catch basin cleaning. We are required now to increase our catch basin cleaning frequency. We do have a catch basin cleaning truck in-house. It's no longer adequate to just use that service and keep up with our compliance. We now have to clean every catch basin in town at the point where the sump in the basin reaches about 50% capacity or half full. That requirement may go up with the new permit, which the draft of that permit was just released. We're providing comments on it now, but it's likely that we'll have to even further increase our catch basin cleaning services. So we're still cleaning them in-house, but what we've decided to do is also put it out to bid for ancillary help, and so we currently have a contract for a company to help us out meet that requirement. And the third part of that is detention pond cleaning. We are required now to clean all of our detention ponds in town. We've got around 72 or 73 stormwater BMPs in town that require cleaning. And all these new projects that are coming in that have advanced stormwater systems and stormwater BMPs are fantastic, but they do require maintenance. And so we have a contract for the pond mowing and cleaning services as well. All that money comes out of this. We also use this account to fund any sort of hydrologic study that we might need in a special circumstance or a specialty drainage project.
What's the frequency of that permitting? Is it annual?
The permitting, it's actually a 5-year permit. We're still working off of the 2019 permit. But the permit before that was actually 2008, I believe. So it's a 5-year permit that took 9 years or 11 years, basically.
So would that be 15 grand a year, or is it?
Oh, no, this ask is just for this 1 year, $75,000.
Okay.
Yeah. But it will be phased. Next year, we'll likely either ask for another 75 or potentially, I think there's 100 in the 5-year capital plan.
Is this something that should move to the budget as opposed to a capital outlay?
Yeah, absolutely.
That could be up for discussion in years coming.
I'm not suggesting it for this year, but it's not, I mean, it's not really a capital item.
Yeah, we do have a line item in our highway contractual, I believe, it's called our drainage account. I think it's about $60,000. So, again, if we were to add 75 or 100 to that, it's a robust increase. But I mean, for me, either way, as long as the money is there and available, it's important to have it. It's compliance. We have to do it. There's really no way around it.
Jamie, I would suggest that you add it to your budget line item, and you can just put a note for the first couple of years at the bottom of the page saying that account increased because of the switch from one line to the other. Because at the end of the day, it's still the same dollar value.
Right.
But I agree, it should not be in a capital outlay, because it's something that it's a recurring
Sure.
type of thing.
Is this a recommendation for this current FY26
No, you can leave that
Okay.
fine, yeah.
next
Just
year?
Ongoing.
Madam Chair, just for clarity for me. So if something's ongoing, we're making a recommendation, it's not,
Well, it doesn't, after I said that, I realized that that's not necessarily true in all instances.
okay.
So, yeah, but this is something that is more of this is something that needs to be in the regular budget. It's not a capital,
Especially since it's mandatory.
yeah.
Yeah, we're not making
Yeah.
a choice here. We
Yeah.
have to
Right,
do
right.
this.
Yeah.
So the stuff we have to do should just be in the budget.
Right.
Item.
Yeah, not in capital.
Right.
We're not building anything. We're complying with the laws.
Okay. Moving on to item number 8, We are requesting $825,000 to replace the existing turf carpet at Alumni Stadium at Wilmington High School. This field was completed in 2013, right before the new high school was built. And it has an 8 to 10 year life. The warranty, the 8-year warranty is expired, and so we knew we were planning to basically have this done. It was part of the FY24 capital plan to do the design and engineering. We went through the bid process during FY25, and the strategy there was to try to put it out to bid in the fall. We figured we would get our best pricing if we did it in the fall, because so many other cities and towns are looking to do their turf fields construction in the summer, and they're putting them out to bid in the spring. So because of lack of competition, we thought the prices would come in favorable, and they did. Our original estimate for this field was just under $1 million, so we were able to downscale this to $825,000. So again, if you recall, town meeting in 2023, we went for design services on this. There was an amendment on the floor of town meeting to ask the town to also consider natural grass when we were considering this field. So we accepted the design money with the understanding that we would also investigate that. We went to the select board in July of 2023 to have a public meeting open to the public to kind of vet that out. And through a series of discussions there, we did deem it was in the best interest of the town to continue with a synthetic system for various reasons. I'll be happy to go into those if you wish. But essentially, what we did decide to do was put this out to bid with an add-all. So we definitely wanted a synthetic system. The alt one would basically be crumb rubber, which is essentially what we have out there now. It's called SBR crumb rubber. But we also wanted to see what the pricing would be like if we were to bid this with an alternative infill. And so our engineers recommended a product called Brockfill, which has been popular with some other towns. Brockfill is in a new field in Watertown. I believe the town of Stoneham just put it in. There's a field in Billerica with Brockfill. So instead of crumb rubber, Brockfill is essentially ground up southern yellow pine crumbs. And so we talked to our engineering consultant, and Brockfill was a little bit more expensive, but that really wasn't the governing factor here. We did a comparison on the pros and cons of Brockfill versus keeping with our synthetic crumb rubber. And as it turns out, when we called some other towns and also spoke to some of the sports teams through the athletic department here in Wilmington, it became very apparent that Brockville's a new product and didn't quite seem to be tried and true yet. And I would have really a hard time recommending to you to invest $825,000 in a material that really hasn't been tried and true when the kids really love the crumb rubber at the high school. There's been reports of abrasion with the Brockfill, so it is kind of a harder surface. When they're falling, they're getting more abrasion cuts. Big problem with this field using Brockfill in cold weather. When it freezes, it does harden up. And if you recall, one of the primary drivers of going to synthetic in the first place was that we wanted to be able to use the field during adverse weather conditions. And so, you know, we can currently use the field in the snow if we have to, but certainly during cold and freezing weather, the crumb rubber holds a lot more heat, so it's less prone to freeze versus the Brockfill. It also might require more topping off after a big rain event and after settlement. I didn't believe that until I went to a neighboring town and saw a Brockfill field after a heavy rainstorm. And this is a picture of, I won't mention the town, but it's a town very close to here that has a Brockfill field. It is a beautiful field, don't get me wrong. And again, there's no right or wrong here. These fields are fantastic. But the Brockfill is wood, and it tends to float when it gets wet. And so this Brockfill migrated into a nearby rain garden. What does that mean? It means the staff now has to clean the Brockfill out and now purchase more Brockfill for the field, because you really can't reuse it once it gets mixed with all that mulch and everything else. So for all those reasons, we've decided to stick with the primary base bid, which was to go with SBR crumb rubber. I do want to be transparent. Originally, we were looking to try to reuse the existing crumb rubber that's on the high school turf field. That was an option. Typically, you can reuse it one cycle, and then in another 10 years, if we decide to do crumb rubber again, we'd probably have to replace it and do new crumb. That recommendation has changed from our engineer. What's going on is some other fields that have chosen to reuse their crumb rubber, they put it aside, and that crumb is also full of all sorts of other debris from 10 years of playing on it, bobby pins, rivets from helmets, fibers from the turf. It's all mixed in. And so when they reuse that, that material gets loose, especially the fibers from the turf, from the old turf. And that tends to migrate into the surrounding wetlands. So from an environmental standpoint, it was recommended that we purchase new crumb rubber. But in our specs, it is a requirement that the existing crumb rubber has to be recycled responsibly at a certified place that handles SBR crumb rubber recycling.
Jamie, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Did it come up at all that the rubber that they use has been linked to health issues? 'Cause I believe as players ingest that rubber material, it can be harmful.
Yes, that came up quite a bit, and this has been an ongoing debate in basically every town that's decided to stick with SBR crumb rubber. So when we were doing our engineering design, the EPA was in the middle of releasing a report for this very thing. They studied it in 2 phases. Phase 1 was to see what sorts of material and chemicals were in the crumb rubber, and Phase 2 was to see how it impacted health. That report was released on the EPA's website a couple of months ago, actually. And I encourage anyone who wants to read that report can go to EPA. The conclusion of that report was that there was no difference in the bioabsorption of any sort of material from that material into the body. Again, that's published right on the EPA website, so it's been talked about quite a bit. I bring that up because this slide here, crumb rubber SBR is still the majority of what is used in fields as of today. This is Gale, a project list from Gale Associates, who's our engineering consultant. They've recently done, in the last 2 years, 18 SBR crumb rubber fields, and I think the metric was 65% of the fields they do are still SBR crumb rubber. So to your point, there's a lot of information online, like anything else. Some of it's true, some of it's false, but I felt pretty good when we saw that EPA study come out.
Thank you.
Just for my clarity, the migration issue that you brought up with the other material,
Yep.
that does not exist with the crumb rubber, or just exists?
So to that severity, it doesn't exist. We've had plenty of rain events on our field. We don't see the crumb rubber floating all that much. Now, granted, anyone who's played on a crumb rubber field knows that that material can get in your shoes. If you have kids playing on it, it's probably in your living room. That's just, kind of the nature of the beast with this material. But as far as floating in the water, we're not seeing it.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to item number 9.
One other
Yes.
question on that, sorry.
Sure.
When will we be replacing the field?
So because we put it out to bid in the fall, we have a pending contract with our contractor that essentially says we're ready to go pending approval of funds at town meeting. So the
Okay.
contract is null and void if we don't get the money.
So we'd be looking to do it during the summer? I
We're
would
looking
guess?
to do it this summer. So essentially, we've already worked with the school department to block out the months of June, July, and August,
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
After graduation.
right after graduation, yes. Item number 9, we are looking for $38,000 to crack seal and resurface the existing tennis and basketball courts at Wilmington High School. Again, the high school was built around 2013. This is money just for preventative maintenance to help crack seal any cracks that are there. There are some minor cracks, but all in all, it's in pretty good shape. And it'll also afford us to repaint the courts. We want to do that now before the courts get too terribly cracked to the point where they have to be fully replaced at a much higher cost. Item number 10, we're requesting $220,000 to conduct design and permitting of the east head wall at the town-owned culvert in the vicinity of 235 Middlesex Ave to replace a portion of 36-inch corrugated metal pipe and rehabilitate the rest. So we have a 36-inch metal pipe going across our central artery in town, Route 62. This is essentially right near the veteran section of the cemetery, a little bit to the east of the Congregational Church. What we're looking to do here is get some money, this would be design and permitting services, but it's actually phased in 3 parts. So it's not just the pipe that needs to be replaced, but the structural head wall, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, is also cracked and needs to be replaced. In addition to that, down on the bottom of the screen, that's shown in blue, there's a retaining wall just adjacent to the historic section of the cemetery that's holding up the sidewalk for Route 62 that is also failing currently. So this project will consolidate these three projects and have engineering design services funded for it. They'll also perform an alternatives analysis as far as the permitting is concerned. So this photo on the right here is a picture of the pipe itself. Corrugated metal was the product to use back 50 years ago. It's not really something that we traditionally use too often anymore unless it's super galvanized or has some sort of corrosion resistance. But you can see the water line there. There's really no bottom left to the pipe. And the photo in the middle is a picture of the head wall. The inlet to this pipe is down the bottom, kind of behind that crushed stone area. But there is quite a crack vertically running up the head wall. Why is this important? This holds up Route 62. Route 62 is not an easy road to close. So I'm afraid if we don't invest the money now in doing this, again, this is only for a portion of the pipe replacement, essentially what's under the sidewalk, but the majority of the pipe running under the street can be slip-lined. And so if we don't do that, we're going to be forced to physically have to replace the pipe entirely, which of course will require the road to be shut down. And although it can be done, and we can be creative about closing Route 62 down, I really don't want to do it. And I'm sure public safety wouldn't want to do it either. Item number 11? Yes.
Quick question on that, sorry. And thank you for the answers to all the questions I had sent to you.
You're welcome.
So this has, $220,000 this year, and that's, the design phase and all that. And
Yes.
then next year is $850,000.
Yes.
This is something that we potentially could have looked for grant funding for, but because we're not in adherence to Section 3A, we cannot. Is that correct?
Yes and no. We'll still look for potential grant funding, as we do with all of our projects. We have a really good slide at the end of this deck which shows you all the grant money that we've tried to acquire for various projects. My understanding is the MBT zoning would restrict the use of state grants. There may or may not be other federal grants out there that we might be able to acquire, but the yes portion of that answer is there could have been. We potentially could have used an MVP grant for this. Right now, that $825,000 construction cost next year is really a best guess estimate. It could go up or down.
Are we assuming that it would not be, a grant would not come from the state, or are we applying for it and being denied?
But we have not applied for a grant yet for construction.
Right, because my understanding is that it's very undefined as to what punishment towns will get for being out of compliance. And it may not be as bad as we thought it was. So I would encourage, if it's not too much of a administrative lift, to apply for the grants and hope that maybe there still would be some money coming our way.
Our engineering department is fresh on the tracks of some grant opportunities for other projects as well, and so we are not going to stop trying.
Good.
The reason I bring up the MVP grant is, in another couple of slides, you'll see that we have a culvert at Martins Brook on the other side, on the North Wilmington side of 62, where we did apply for MVP funding for. We got secured design money for that, which has already been locked in before town meeting of this past fall. But we were told very specifically that the construction portion of that grant likely wouldn't be awarded to us.
That's the
But more to
3
come on
million?
that.
The 3 million
Yes.
project?
Yep.
Can we get that in writing?
I have it in writing that our design funds for that project are locked in, yes, from the MVP people.
We're gonna get, we're applying and we're assuming we're been told orally, if we're not in compliance, we're not gonna get it, but we haven't been told in writing.
I'm not sure anyone is specifically committing to that just yet because it's a little early, yeah. But we were worried about, because we did get awarded the design funding, we were worried about maybe a retroactive pull on that money, but that is something that we do have in writing that won't affect us.
Just so I'm clear, there was a formal denial of the construction funding, grant?
On the MVP grant, not yet.
Not
No,
yet,
no.
got it.
Yeah, we're still in design, early design phases on that project.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you'll continue to go forward and to get a formal denial, correct?
We'll do everything that we can to try to secure grant funding for any project, yeah.
Just get the formal denial.
We have to, it's our obligation to.
But we would, I think, everybody here would like to see the formal denials and how much we're losing in grant money.
Sure. Moving along, item number 11, we're requesting $14,000 for professional land surveying services to support advanced engineering design for the completion of Phase 3 of the Shady Lane Sidewalk project. This is necessary to help resolve some property line layout challenges for this project, so we do need the services of a professional land surveyor, which we do not have on staff. This will essentially help us finish design to link this sidewalk network, which ends currently at the bottom of the screen here, where Shady Lane kind of takes a hard left before it takes another hard right to exit onto 62. So right now, we do not have a sidewalk in that location, but our plan is to continue that sidewalk network all the way to 62.
Can you orient me on that? I'm lost.
Sure. So to the far right is Uptown Deli. Right across the street from Uptown Deli is the entrance to Shady Lane Drive, which is essentially next to the Shell station. Yeah.
Thank you.
How do you determine that Shady Lane is where the next sidewalk's gonna go? We have lots of places that don't have sidewalks. How do you pick what's next?
Yeah, so this goes back decades. Our long goal was to continue our sidewalk network for roads that are basically within walking distances to schools and along our major network. So this project here is actually part of a multi-phase sidewalk project to eventually connect sidewalks on Glen Road to the North Wilmington area. So if you walk on Glen Road and walk down Lawrence Street, those are relatively new sidewalks that we put in the last 10 or 15 years, and we phased it all the way down. The entirety of Lawrence Street now has sidewalks, and now onto Shady Lane. You can walk all the way to 62, with the exception of the portion that's in red.
But again, how did you decide this was the next place to go? Is
'Cause
there- Just because,
Before the rest of Shady Lane was installed?
no, before anywhere
Yeah.
else in town. I'm assuming there's a whole list of places that don't have sidewalks.
Yeah,
What's the priority and how did you pick and why this one?
So
And I don't-
this goes
I
back,
don't-
yeah, and this goes
curious.
back before I was director. So it's from this, and even, a couple town managers ago too. But this section of Wilmington between Glen Road and Route 62 is very dense with residential people walking around. And there was a need to walk on, to find a connectivity between Glen Road and Route 62. It was just seemed intuitive to try to connect that walking loop. And so we're at the point now that we need to finish this project to complete that. The next portion in our capital plan, you'll see, we have some unfinished sidewalk heading down Woburn Street going to the Woburn Street School. We deferred that because, of course, the fate of the Woburn Street School is still up in the air, so.
Yeah, well, that's what kind of, I guess I'll continue the questions that I have then. Because this is 14 grand for a survey.
Yeah.
And then next year you've got 120 in there for construction on
Yes,
the budget.
yeah,
I'm looking at the Woburn Street sidewalks to Route 62 to Sheridan Road.
yep,
That's gonna cost 1.1 million.
yes.
And the Andover Street, Woburn Street sidewalks are gonna cost $1.5 million.
So,
Can-
great question.
Can we do more where it's 120,000 instead? Because I'm trying to figure out, like, if people aren't getting hurt and the desire to have a sidewalk, there's lots of things we desire.
Sure.
But to spend $2.5 million on sidewalks seems excessive to me, and I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah.
I'd rather do more Shady Lanes at 14. I'm not even sure I want to do Shady Lane for 14 because I don't know, just because someone said decades ago we should do it, is there really a need for it? Are people walking in the street? Are there accidents?
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
complaints? Is there a problem? I don't know. Okay, but, all right. Well, then 14,000 is a lot better. 134,000 for Shady Lane's a lot better than 2.5 million for the other two sections. And if those sections haven't had sidewalks for decades, why do we need to spend that money?
So that's a great point, and you're kind of singing my tune here. The reason those streets don't have sidewalks is they're not the low-hanging fruit. There's challenges with them. There's ledge problems. There's potential property line takings. The section of Woburn Street that does not have a sidewalk between 62 and Sheridan, if you walk down there now, some of the houses, their front yards are retaining walls. And so the engineering to put a sidewalk in is extremely challenging, and the construction is extremely challenging. So those have kind of been pushed off to the back burner. But we've always wanted a long-term walking route to the Woburn Street School. That's why these projects keep getting deferred, and we realize they might not be a hot topic right now. But to answer your question, we do get plenty complaints from people in those areas that are looking to walk their dogs or walk on the street, and they're forced to dodge traffic. So
$2.5 million seems like an awful lot of money.
it is.
We're,
Well, we're talking about Shady Lane right now.
no, I know, but it's in next year's budget, and we're talking about sidewalks, so I think it's relative to understand why would we approve more, and how do we decide which ones go next? It's all related. It's $2.5 million over the next few years on sidewalks, and,
I think if you have sidewalks, you realize the value of them.
oh,
And I'm fortunate enough to live in a neighborhood that has sidewalks on both sides of the street, which is a little bit unusual now. And unfortunately, they're too narrow for two people to walk on. But it's been amazing just to have that all these years. And I can understand why people would want to have them, and I understand your point as well, how much would they be used?
Right.
I can tell you that Shady Lane and Lawrence Street, I used to walk there, and we would constantly be dodging cars, no matter what time of day it was. It was kind of a dangerous road to be in the middle of.
My wife and I walk on that, I mean, we live right next to Town Hall. We do the loop all the way down to Shady Lane and back on Lawrence, down Glen. And that is the only section on that loop that doesn't have sidewalks. It's a hill going up, and you are walking against traffic. It's not a very safe thing to do.
And
It's the
especially when
place
you
where-
turn.
It's the place where I worry the most when we're walking, and, I mean, I think it's, especially since we've invested in all the way down Lawrence Street and all the way, basically, this would allow people all along Lawrence Street to walk to the North Wilmington train station, which a lot of people do. The Shawshene bus picks up at the end of Shady Lane, and kids are walking from the corner of Lawrence all the way down. I walk past 3 or 4 kids in the morning.
I'm not
I'm just-
suggesting it's not needed. My question is, why is Shady Lane next, and why are these other two projects next? What's the whole list, and what's the priority for making those decisions?
Well, Shady Lane is
Because I'll
a
bet if we
missing
went out to the
piece.
public, there's lots of people that would love to have sidewalks. So how did we decide that this one's next?
Well, Shady Lane is a missing final piece
But
of
there's
the
missing
connection
pieces all
from-
over town.
of the project that started down on Lawrence Street.
For how long
So-
has it been missing, and when was the last time a piece of this project was done?
Just a number of years
Yeah,
ago.
we've been working on this project for the last
Yeah.
10 years or so.
Yeah.
I don't believe we've done anything last year, but we're just looking to basically finish off this project.
Yeah.
And to your point, Mr. DiOrio, I think it is beneficial to do the exercise of a construction estimate, which is where these budget figures are coming from, to show the public, oh, wow, it is $2 million to finish this sidewalk. That's why the town's not just going out and putting it in. And a lot of our old sidewalk network was just done by our DPW, where they went out with a tractor and just, there's no permitting back then, decades ago. There's just so much more involved with it now, and you have to account for stormwater. Our stormwater permit is tripped for it, and, we have to account for runoff and that sort of thing, too. So it is costly, but at least now we can point to the figure and explain why we've been deferring these projects the last several years. So in this case, like was stated, we're just asking for $14,000 to help basically finish some engineering services for this.
Does the request for the new sidewalk plow cover the increase in square footage, how you would refer
So for
to
the rest of this, it's really incidental. It's such a small section of sidewalk that'll go in. We had 2 sidewalk plows for the longest time. We added a third one about 5 years ago or so. And so the primary driver there was we're getting a new sidewalk on Main Street from the center of town all the way to Woburn, which is a very long run.
Sidewalk plow doesn't do every sidewalk, though.
No, we concentrate on just the major walking routes in town.
So I don't know
But-
if this would add to that network.
It would, because we're currently plowing the sidewalks on Lawrence Street and Shady Lane.
Oh.
I mean, essentially, their sidewalk plow has to jump on the street to get back onto 62, so he may as well just stay on the sidewalk at this point.
Yeah, a non-financial comment, and I know we're the finance committee. if you do get the funding, do not let people put their mailboxes in the center of the sidewalk. The plow drivers, they have to go like this all the way down Woburn
It's
Street.
tough,
You can't
yeah.
walk down the sidewalk. So what's the point?
Unfortunately, there's kind of, we're restricted with that because the postal service really dictates where the mailboxes can go. I would love it if the mailboxes were either posted on the houses or on the, the opposite side of the street.
Some of them are a real problem. I've seen women with baby strollers have to go into the road, and
Sure.
Woburn Street is dangerous.
Sure.
Again, it's maybe not the right forum, but they can
It's
put
a
them so they're
concern.
not directly in the center, so that your guys don't have to
Yeah.
swerve around.
Okay, and our last item, this is actually not a funding request, it's just on here to show you that we're active with our grants. So this is the culvert at Martins Brook. Shea Concrete is just to the east of this circle. The new warehouse at 800 Salem Street is just to the north. This is the old clapper-style culvert that's in the bottom left here in the photo. This culvert is beginning to deteriorate, and we actually applied for an MVP grant, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant, for the two-phase design of this project. This is year 2, FY '26. We're looking for grant funding for this, which we've already secured. I just wanted to put it up here to let you know that, otherwise, this would definitely have to have been a capital request, but luckily, our design has been funded. Originally, the plan was to go for a construction grant on this using the same MVP grant. We're skeptical at this point that that'll be funded based on the results of the fall town meeting. And so that wraps it up for the non-water side of the presentation. Are there any other questions I can answer for you before we turn it over to water and sewer?
So, can I, just about this Martins Brook culvert, so you telling us, so we're in the second year of the design phase. Is next year the construction phase? What will we be seeing?
Yeah. If you look in the capital plan, I believe it's either next year or the year after, but, again, the design, the intent was, once we secured design plans, was to try to chase a grant for it. The most logical grant to use was the MVP grant, because it actually doesn't just affect Wilmington, it affects North Reading, so it was kind of a regional approach to fixing this culvert. We've also, in the meantime, investigated some other grant opportunities for the project. There was a fisheries grant that we've pursued through the National Oceanographic Association, which we actually just caught word that we've been denied on that one because we're not quite there yet with our design. We're still in the middle of design. So if we were a little bit closer in that, we may have been eligible for that grant, but we're not. The engineering department is currently researching a Federal Highway Administration grant for something similar. That would, I think the grant opening for that one is this coming summer, so we might be a little bit closer to try to pursue that. We don't expect that those two grants would be affected by the town meeting.
Affected by the change in administration, however.
Yes, maybe. Seeing no further questions, we will hand it over to Joe for water and sewer.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Good evening, everybody. I'm Joe Labeo. I'm the Deputy Director. I didn't add any additional slides to the existing PowerPoint, so the way I'm going to handle it is pretty much stay in the format that I have in years past, where we go through the budget step by step, primarily using the packet that was distributed, along with the white budget book that you have. And just so a little background here. First off, for water, just to give you a quick overview, within Wilmington, there's over 138 miles of water main in town. There's over 7,500 water services when you take into account commercial, residential, industrial, and municipal, along with 2 water treatment plants, 3 water storage tanks, and then we have an additional 1,200 or so fire hydrants and about 1,300 gate valves in town. So it's a quite extensive system here in Wilmington that we are in charge of maintaining. So just, I guess, first looking at the distributed packet that you received on page 10, you'll see the typical summary table. And again, if you don't have the actual page in your white book, that's page 77. and I say this every year, but it's important to note that the structure of both water and sewer is a little different than the DPW general fund structure, in that the water budget includes the capital items. So the first thing you might see on page 10 of the booklet is, the bottom line. It jumps drastically, right? And the reason for that, just to get that out there right away, is because of the capital items, primarily the Main Street water main project that the town manager Slagle had alluded to earlier this week in both of his meetings, okay? And I'll get into the specifics of that project, but I felt it was worth noting right away. That's the true driver on where you'll see the major increase for this budget. And along the same lines, when we talk about sewer, it's the same concept. There's one major capital project in sewer, and that's included in the budget for this fiscal year '26. However, in reality, although it's shown on paper as being funded in FY '26, the intention with a positive town meeting vote would be to borrow money for both these projects and pay them back over a series of years. So although it shows it on paper in FY '26, in reality, it's paid back in subsequent years. So with that, I can jump right into breaking down each major category and what the differences are between FY '25 and '26 and justifying why they were made. So first classification in water, personnel services. Total budget of just about $1.2 million. This increases about $96,000 from FY '25. That's an 8.7% increase. And as Jamie had mentioned in his presentation, this is primarily related to the 2 years of the COLA increases along with contractual obligations due to step increases. It's worth noting, we do have one retirement within the water division, Dave Ward. He's a G65 equipment operator. He's worked for the town since 1995. If anyone knows Dave, he's certainly going to be missed in more ways than one. He's vital to, and has been vital to, the success of the division, and certainly his institutional knowledge, just from his time being here, is going to be missed and tough to replace. As far as any additional positions, are they being requested? They are not, so we're sticking with the same 11 full-time employees that we currently have. Moving down the list, under contractual services, total budget of $1.7 million. This year, we made 4 adjustments within this classification, and that represents an overall increase of about $641,000, which is 60%. And I'll explain that now, why it's such an increase. The first and largest adjustment, and this is, for those of you who have been here for some time, understand that and really recognize that this happens year to year, and that's the MWRA assessment, right? Total budget for the MWRA this year is about $1.3 million. And that, as I mentioned, increased about $612,000 from FY '25. Just as a reminder, there are 2 components to the MWRA cost. We have a fixed annual cost that we have to pay for $207,915. That's a 20-year term. It's essentially an entrance fee that all towns are required to pay when they enter the MWRA system. Wilmington joined in 2009, so that 20-year term will expire in 2029. So that's one component of that cost for the MWRA. The second component is actual water usage. That's the amount of water that you pay, by the town to use throughout calendar year '24. So this past year, we're estimating about $1.1 million. So you add the 1.1 plus the $208,000, and that's where you get the $1.3 million. One question that typically arises that I'll address now is why is there so much volatility, I guess, in year to year? And as I mentioned in the past, it's really related almost directly to the weather. If you recall, this past summer, it was hot, it was dry, we were in the midst of a drought. In fact, we're still technically within a drought right now. So what you see is the town production ability of our existing wells drops somewhat. But at the same time as that dropping, the usage amongst town residents and commercial businesses and so forth increases. So that's why you see that increase in purchase from the MWRA. Conversely, the year before, we had a wet, rainy summer. It was cool. usage across the board was down, and that's why if you were to look at the year before, the amount of MWRA assessment is quite lower than what what we're projecting this year. Any questions on MWRA?
Just to refresh my memory, this is water that we buy from the MWRA when our need exceeds our capacity.
Correct.
So we don't, if our well, if we are pumping enough for residents and businesses to use, we don't take any MWRA water, and we just have to pay the $220,000.
Correct, so,
And
yes.
So is this a capacity issue, or is this a usage issue?
Well,
Or is this just a basic strategy that we are going to continue for a long period of time?
it's more or less the nature of how this, so each individual community is different, right? The way Wilmington is structured is the wells, not to give you a history lesson, but back in 2003, when we had 9 active wells, it wasn't needed to purchase water from MWRA, but due to contamination issues, that has since changed. Now we're down to 4 active current wells, so we don't have the same ability to produce water that we once did, right? So that's one way it's changed. The second way it's
So
changed.
that's a capacity issue.
That's a capacity issue, yes. Yes, and just, as I mentioned, it's a seasonal issue also, right? If you were to look at the months of January through, call it April, primarily the water being consumed in town is town-produced, right? But then when you get into the warm weather months, when demand goes up, our existing ability to produce water is what it is, but we cannot meet typical demand. And that's where we supplement with the MWRA.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the second adjustment within this classification, that's under professional and technical services. We increased that $20,000, and this primarily is attributed to an increase of costs for third-party lab services, service instrumentation, and then also computers for our SCADA system, which is basically the brain of the 2 treatment plants that we have. The third adjustment, these last 2 are relatively minor, however, worth noting. The third adjustment is under the hazardous waste household program. We jumped that $10,000, and basically why we're doing that is we're seeing an increase in household participation in the hazardous waste day, which is great to see. So that's reflected in that $10,000 increase. And then lastly, within this class, there's a small decrease of $808 in the DEP assessment. This is simply a regulatory requirement that the DEP charges for water used in calendar year '23. So moving along to the third class, utilities, there is only one adjustment, and that sees a jump of about $19,000, and that's under electricity, and this change is driven primarily from the projection from RMLD on what we should expect for a rate increase. And as you would expect, the electricity powers the 2 water treatment plants, along with certainly our wells and pumps in town. And as you turn the page, you'll see materials and supplies. A total budget of about $827,000, and this year we made 4 adjustments within this class, and those 4 adjustments represent an increase of about $30,000. Of the 4, 3 are relatively negligible, but the 4th one is a little more significant. The first one, we increased the facility maintenance supplies account by $5,000, and that's basically to pay for the increase in cost that's attributed to repairing and maintaining our existing chemical feed pumps, basically just the units that make sure that we accurately treat the drinking water. Second adjustment, another $5,000 under operations, maintenance, and supplies. And this is exactly what you would think it would be. It's for construction material, tools and equipment, whether it be pumps, gravel, shovels, safety equipment, things along those lines. One more adjustment that's relatively minor for $3,500 under distribution, maintenance, and repair. These are the items such as fire hydrants, gate valves, pipe, meters, your typical day-to-day products that you would use. Last adjustment within this class is a little larger than the other two, but not unexpected. We raised chemicals, $17,000. That's a 5% jump. This account pays exactly what it says. It's for the chemicals that are used at both treatment plants to make sure that we can produce, safe drinking water for the town. And just as a reminder, that's a pretty large number. However, we are part of the Northeast Merrimack Valley Chemical Consortium. So what that is, it's a group of over 75 public water suppliers. And we bid these chemicals annually, and with the hope that with such a large volume, there's more advantageous purchasing power. So that's it for those classes. I can move on to furnishings if everyone is, okay. So furnishings and equipment, we have a total budget of $42,500. And this account actually decreases by $18,000. So that's a decrease of just about 30%. And there are 4 items that are listed under this. The first one, $20,000. This is to replace 3 CL17 monitors at the Sargent Treatment Plant. Basically, to break it down, these are the units that make sure that the disinfectant, as it leaves the plant, is what it needs to be. So it's critical, and it's also tied into the rest of the treatment process. We're asking for $15,000 to replace the cable for the sludge drive at the water treatment plant at Sargent Plant. Basically, to simple it down, this is a pulley system that allows our, basically a unit to clean the sedimentation at the bottom of the sedimentation basin. It's original to the plant. The plant was built in the late 1980s. We've done some temporary measures. We've taken some actions to temporarily solve the issue, but the repairs we made are not a long-term solution, so the right thing to do is replace the whole entire cable, again, for $15,000. So the first 2 are attributed to water treatment. These last 2 items are for the distribution maintenance crew. We're looking for $4,000 for a ProPress plumbing tool. This basically will allow our maintenance crew to enter homes and exit homes, really, after they've made repairs as quickly as possible and try to just lessen the intrusiveness of disrupting people in the day-to-day lives. And the last one under furnishings, we're looking for $3,500 for a water line locator. This you've certainly seen before. We typically purchase one a year. And as I've mentioned, this helps the maintenance crew identify buried utilities. It's basically a metal detector at just a higher level. If there aren't any questions, I can jump right into capital. So this year, we are looking for 8 items in the capital outlay, and they represent an overall increase of about $5.7 million. Right? And as I mentioned, that includes the $5.5 million for the water main on Main Street.
It's 4 sidewalks.
So the first item, $100,000 for in-house water infrastructure upgrade program. This is a yearly program that we've used going back quite some time previous to me. Basically, it's used to upgrade any deficiencies that might be identified within the distribution system. We upgrade water mains, we replace fire hydrants, we add gate valves, really whatever's needed to really just make this infrastructure as best as it can. And the best part about this particular item is it's using primarily town resources. So as opposed to bidding this out to a private contractor, we use our own resources, meaning our own personnel, equipment, time, so there's a cost-saving aspect to this. Second capital item, this would be to redevelop Shawshene Ave well and the Salem Street wells. This is for $55,000. More of a maintenance item, however, it's been in capital going back for as long as I know, so we've kept it there to have. It's been discussion alluding to what was discussed earlier about possibly moving this into operating. But for the time being, we've kept it in capital. It's really just cleaning of those existing wells. The third item is a relatively large ticket that you've seen before, and you'll probably see certainly moving forward. Is $500,000 to replace the granular activated carbon at the treatment plants. What this is, it's basically just a filter media that removes taste, odor, volatiles, PFAS. Each plant, like I said, we have 2 plants. Each plant holds about 60,000 pounds of this particular carbon. Drinking water regulations are certainly evolving. They're becoming more and more challenging to meet. So you're going to see this as we move forward yearly, if not more often than we're currently seeing. So now we move to the largest ticket on this capital outlay for this year. As I mentioned, this is the Route 38 Main Street water main replacement for $5.5 million. So this project, I'm sure you're well aware, this is included with the MassDOT project to replace and rehabilitate that stretch of roadway right from Main Street 62 all the way down to, basically for the water line, we're talking to Eames Street. We think it's an opportune time to replace the water main. The water main's over 70 years old. It's existing 10-inch unlined cast iron, which is no longer used, right? Incidentally, even without the MassDOT project, this line was scheduled or recommended for replacement in the town's water master plan. So it just happens to be, we think, prudent to do at the same time that the roadways is open, right? As far as the cost, last year I was here, and the cost at that point was $4.5 million. So the natural question would be, well, why has it jumped over $1 million in 12 months? And it's, like everything else, we're talking to our engineers and consultants, and they're telling us they're recommending we increase it for multiple reasons. One, just simple escalation costs, right? And then additionally, there's an unstable market, from what we're being told, as far as materials are concerned. So yes, ideally, we would love to budget this lower, but due to some uncertainties in the market and what our consultant is seeing as far as recently bid projects, it was recommended to keep it at $5.5 million, really to be conservative and hope that there's enough contingency there to get this done.
How many miles is that?
It's just under 2. I think it's, I want to say it's 1.75 miles or so. Basically, right from the center of town to Eames Street. Yeah.
How long does it take?
That's $2.75 million a mile.
It's a costly project, certainly. I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
I'm sorry, it's Brad, I'm sorry. How long is that gonna take?
That's going to be a multi-year project from start to finish. I should tell you, not as far as the timeline, it is being advertised in June of 2025, the project as a whole. So soon thereafter, we should have, a recommendation for who the contract is going to be. And again, this is driven by MassDOT. The next item on the capital outlay, this is a repeat item from years past. There's $20,000 for a distribution system leak detection survey. This is a regulatory requirement from both Mass DEP and the MWRA. It has to be done once every 2 years. Last time we did it was 2023. And if anyone has actually seen them, it's pretty interesting, to me at least. But what we do is we receive quotes, and whoever the low quoter, who's also reputable, and we do background checks, of course. But you may see them around town with electric bikes. So they hook up, it's an acoustic system where they hook up in fire hydrants, try to identify any underground leaks that aren't showing. Sometimes it happens where there could be a stream nearby, there could be a catch basin, where there could be an underground pipe that's leaking and nobody knows, right? So we do this in hopes of capturing any waste, of course, and then also it's additional water that's not being captured by meters throughout town. Moving along, we have $650,000 for the water main rehab on Forest Street. The scope of this project is to rehab the existing 4,200 feet of 8-inch water main on Forest Street. You might recall that this was funded originally in FY '24. So this, in fact, is a supplement to that initial amount, because we bid it at the time, and the bids came back significantly higher than what was in the budget. So we had to put that in the back burner, and here we are once again with this money right here. And I know there was a question as far as grant funding for this. So this is expected to be fully funded through the EPA, CFP, it's Community Project Funding Grant. Wilmington applied for the grant quite some time ago. We were notified that $959,000 was allocated to Wilmington. What that means is it's there. This grant is a little unique. We personally have not dealt with this style of grant, so we're working currently with our water consultant to proceed with the administrative submittals that are required, right? So we're told that the money is for Wilmington. We just have not seen it yet. That's the next step.
650 is to cover the overage. What's the total cost of the project?
So originally we had $1 million, right? So add this 650, and we had some engineering cost originally. So 850 plus 650, we're around 1.5 or so million dollars. If there is an overage, because as you see, the 959 is more than the 650, of course, right? If we have that ability to use the balance, we also, in our application, applied to use this towards carbon, right? So if we don't use this, we can apply this towards replacing the GAC that I mentioned previously. Two more items here on the capital. The next one, once again, is more of a maintenance. It's to clean the Barrows well field. There's 15 wells at that location. It's basically just to maintain the operation of those.
I was wondering why that one's 100,000 and the other two are only 55, but it's the number
Yep,
of wells at
it's,
each location.
right, so the Shawshene well has basically one, Salem has 3,
Got it.
this one has 15.
Thank you.
And they're different types of wells too.
Thank you.
And then the last item under water capital is to purchase one utility truck with a plow for $90,000. This will replace a 2016 Ford 350 utility vehicle. This is used by our maintenance crew for everything under the sun, from water main breaks to service repairs to really everything day-to-day operations requires. So that's the extent of the water budget. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer before I move on to sewer?
Just one question from me. So the EPA grant, you go through the process, you get the money for it, apply it between the forestry project and maybe the carbon
Right.
project. So what happens to the 650 that's in the capital budget?
Well, after they receive the money, the 650 would just go into free cash.
Free cash?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, moving on to sewer. Sewer is relatively quick, typically, and it's the same case this year. Sewer has a total budget of $4.9 million. This year, it increases by $1.2 million. And as I mentioned, similar to water, the capital projects are included within this budget, so that's why you'll see the increase on the bottom line. Starting first with personnel services, there's a total budget of about $113,000. That increases $9,000, that's 8.7%, and exactly for the same exact reasons that we mentioned for Jamie's presentation and along with the water, it's due to the increase in COLA over the 2 years. And also similar to water, there are no additional personnel being requested for sewer. If you move down the budget list to materials and supplies, there's one adjustment, and this is pretty standard, and that's to the M. DeBray sewer assessment. That increases $196,000. And as you would expect, this is typically with the exception of the capital project this year, this is typically the largest expense within the sewer budget. Everything else within the day-to-day operations remains level funded.
Hey, can I ask you a question
Yeah.
on how this all works? So you're talking about water. We haven't had a lot of snow. Jamie, you brought that up in your discussion. So we're likely, and we're already at a drought level. And all I can see coming down the road is we're gonna consume more MWRA water. And you made a comment that that's linked also to, or actually, maybe you hadn't, but is that also linked to, we're gonna consume more water, and therefore our sewer costs are gonna go up as well?
So that's a great question. Sewer, ironically enough, is not metered the same way as water, right? Through the MWRA. There's a different system on how that's metered. For many reasons, it has to do with the size, the way the hydraulics of the pipe work and how the accuracy of the meter works. For some reason, the MWRA likes to remain as consistent as possible with the sewer bills. Like if you were to compare year to year, you're not gonna see the same volatility, you're not gonna see the ups and downs that you typically would see with water. So there's a level of consistency from year to year.
Okay, thank you.
And I do note in here that, and this is typical, is that the MWRA doesn't give you an actual accurate, I guess not accurate, an official amount until June. What they provide right now is a preliminary estimate, but it's generally in the same ballpark. You're not gonna see a major range or change between the final assessment and what we've been provided right now. And so moving on to that one capital outlay item that I had mentioned, there's the $1.2 million replacement of the industrial waste sewer pump station. If you recall, the design engineering for this project was allocated in FY '25, so currently, and that's just underway, that just began recently, with the hope that the construction will be in FY '26. So this particular pump station was constructed in the 1960s. It's an underground station, and right now it's in pretty poor condition. And your next question might be, well, I know last year somebody had asked me, how much is the construction gonna be? And at that point, we had a placeholder that was provided from our consultant for about $500,000. But now you see it at 1.2. Why is that change? As I mentioned with the other project, we're constantly in talks with our consultant. So as of this fall, they had suggested that we bump that $500,000 to $750,000, right? So where does this jump to 1.2 come from? Subsequently, it was identified that the force main, which is the pipe that leaves the pump station, also requires replacement. So we're talking an additional 1,500 feet of 8-inch cast iron existing pipe that needs to be replaced, and it absolutely makes sense to do it at the same time as you're constructing a brand-new pump station. So I just figured I would throw that out there. That's where that jump comes from. That's really it for sewer. Any other questions that I can answer?
I agree completely changing the pipe, but did we have consultants help us with what we should build and how we should build it? And do we have any recourse against them for not recommending the pipe change in the original cost? Because now it's a surprise to the town. Because that pipe has been there for 50, 60 years, so it's not like it's something new. Did they just not see it, or what changed from when we did the feasibility study or consultancy to help us with this to now?
It's a great question, and I share your, where you're going with it. But I think it was just something that they didn't look into at the time.
They missed it. Can we at least get some sort of adjustment on our consultancy fee since they missed it?
I can tell you that.
I don't expect them to give us $300,000 to replace the pipe, but if they didn't do the job right, there should be some recourse.
Well, I can tell you that, just take it for what it's worth, this is a sewer consultant who we've used for decades, and they've certainly helped the town with II sewer mitigation. They're very reputable. They've been great to deal with. I wouldn't say they're one of the engineer or consulting firms that we've had problems with in the past.
And I would also add too, in the world of consulting, when you're retrofitting an existing old system, it's almost like, where do you stop? So like we hired the consultant to design the pump station. He's making a recommendation that's in the best interest of the town, if we can afford it, to continue with the pipe. But ultimately, I don't feel like he was lax in his duties in this particular case.
You guys are closer to it than I am, it just was a surprise.
So that's the extent of my part of the presentation for water and sewer.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments?
And then the last part of your narrative as well, we did again update a list that you saw last year in your packet of, it's up on the screen here, recent earmarks and grants that we're either involved in or actively pursuing, just to show you that we know we have some heavy projects here, but we're also simultaneously chasing alternative funding sources.
That's great.
So-
Anybody?
Yeah, so just for people who may be watching at home, if there are anybody, but the water and sewer is paid for not through taxation, but by the ratepayers. What impact do we expect on rates based on some of these good-sized capital projects that are being recommended?
Sure, I don't think there's any way to get around the fact that this budget certainly has some extreme expenses, and that's gonna continue. So I know that the finance department is in conversation right now with town manager and the public works, but I think it's inevitable, clearly, that the rates are gonna have to rise. How much, I don't think a number has been defined as of tonight, but those talks are underway, and I think it would be, just to be blunt, they're going to have to rise.
When was the last time we increased water rates?
November 2023.
Yeah.
I can tell you that if you were to look at a comparison of, just for take it for what it's worth, Wilmington is still one of the more, I guess, on the lower end of water rates, if you were to compare to area towns.
Mr. Slagle?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify one earlier question regarding the capital projects and what happens if the funding isn't used for those capital projects, because this is an enterprise fund. It doesn't go back into free cash. So in this capital plan, that is listed as being funded with an outside source, so it's not being set aside with funding even from the enterprise fund. It's assumed that because it's being funded from a grant that we're not setting aside water or sewer funds for those grant funded capital expenditures. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for that correction.
So, on kind of continuing on that subject, your grant narrative on page 18 talks about the CPF grant and seems to imply that, I don't know if this hasn't been updated or if it is updated, but it seems to imply that the grant hasn't made its way all the way through the appropriations process in Washington. Is that accurate, or is that,
So I believe,
need to be
you want to
updated.
answer that?
Yeah, that's left over from last year's memo, so that is an inaccuracy, yes, that's correct.
so it's in the FY '24 federal budget? So the line item that the feds would give us this money from is already appropriated by the House and Senate and signed by the president in the FY '24 budget?
Yes, it's just the administrative paperwork at the local level that we're going through now, yeah.
You see where my
Yes.
confusion came
Yeah,
from?
thank you.
Just so you know, I read it.
I have one quick question on the bond issuance. What is the term of that note? Is that a 30, 15-year? Does anyone know?
I believe it's typically 15, but we can defer the question to the finance department, or we can get back to you.
That's fine. I'm more just, I guess, maybe to be more precise about the point, is this 1.2 million expected to be an increase remaining for the next 15 years?
Yeah, so typically, from my understanding, is that will be shown up as debt, right?
Yeah,
As has past projects where money has been borrowed.
got it. Thank you.
I think we're good.
Thank you both.
Thank
All
you
right,
very
well
much.
done. Thank you.
Wow.
Appreciate
Excellent
the
You
job.
analysis.
guys know your stuff.
Just a minute, please.
You guys know your stuff.
Okay, minutes for approval, we do not have any.
Do we, can we let these gentlemen go home?
Well, just in case there are some questions, so.
Comments?
I'm not gonna answer for them. So we will take public comments now, restricted to a 3-minute limit.
Would that be 3 minutes for each department?
No, that's 3 minutes
6
in
minutes?
total, Mr. McDonald.
Then I'll just speak without waiting for your questions. There are thousands of dollars each year in the budget for printing, and there's not one single budget book for somebody that comes to the meeting to be able to access it and follow along. So I think that's a problem. I guess this question is for Mr. Diorio, since you've been on the board for a while. Mr. Diorio, how much money from these departments last year has gone into free cash?
First of all, you should ask all questions through the chair.
Oh, through you then.
Yes, and Mr. Diorio, do you want to answer that or not?
I do not.
Okay.
Probably doesn't know.
Carry
Okay.
on.
And I noticed that the department has advertised positions for heavy equipment operators, and I noticed the salaries are about half of what the industries pay. And so are you looking for entry-level employees? That would be one question that I have. And my other concern is, why do we have an engineering department that can't even design a culvert? The other thing I wanted to mention is we have a bipartisan infrastructure bill, and I was wondering if that was being looked at to fund culverts. The other concern was with the town in California that pretty much got burnt down, and there was a water issue, and we have some talk about a culvert over by Shea Concrete, where water just continues to flow out from town, just continues to flow. If anybody has looked at redirecting that water or piping that water into a large tank underground for fire purposes, or to feed these guys that are coming in, taking water out of our water system for their hydro seeding operations and other things. Personally believe that contracts should be opened at the select board for transparency. The other thing I kind of calculated was we were talking about sidewalks, and there's about 1.5 tons in a cubic yard of asphalt. And if you looked at about 4 inches of asphalt for a 5-foot wide sidewalk, it'd be about there'd be about 81 square feet in a cubic yard of asphalt, which would pave 5 foot by 16 foot. And you figure in some gravel, another ton for gravel, it's about $180 in materials for 16 feet of sidewalk. So my question is, does the town have its own sidewalk paving machine, or is this going to be going out for contracts? With regard to the sidewalks, are they going to be put out for bid, or is the town going to do it? And I'd like to know how much money is in the water department account. The other question is, when are your department's employees paid? Are they paid every week, or is it biweekly? And my concern with that is, it's my understanding that the Wilmington Board of Selectmen approves warrants, which are expenditures for the town, but then they didn't meet for an entire month. And then all of a sudden, at the end of that period, there's about 20 warrants that they're approving. And so my question is, if you're being paid every week or every 2 weeks, and the selectmen aren't meeting to approve those warrants, are people just being paid without their authorization? And if that's the case, why do we even have a Board of Selectmen that handles that. It just seems like.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. You're out
Okay.
of time now.
Can,
It's
I'll just wait for all the.
significantly past time, so
Yeah,
we
you-
appreciate your comments.
Okay, can you
Thank you.
provide that answer to me as far as how much money from the department went into free cash last year?
Sure.
Okay, I'm listening.
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
Well, you're the finance committee.
Thank you very much, Mr.
You didn't prepare
McDonald.
yourself
Have
for
a
this-
great
you
evening.
didn't
Thank
prepare
you
yourself for this
coming out in the
meeting?
cold. Moving along, other business. So I just want to bring up the invitation that the town manager made on Tuesday night for anybody on this committee to send in questions or things like that. I just want to remind everybody here, if you do send out any kind of email to anyone in this town on behalf of a sitting person in the finance committee, you should definitely CC town manager. Not town manager, excuse me, the chairman of the board, John Doherty. So just keep that in mind if you are going to do that, and keep in mind that they're a very busy office, and keep your questions and things like that to a minimum if possible. And other than that, does anybody have any other questions or comments? And, or shall I
Yeah,
feel free to let you guys,
Question.
Thank you.
do you have a question of them?
No, I just had a question about our schedule. I
Oh,
had asked
okay.
last.
Thank you very much.
Last.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
I asked last Tuesday about the school department,
Yes.
and we were told that we're gonna meet with them the same
Yes.
night we would meet with
Yes.
Shawshene Tech. That's a big night.
It
And
is.
That's, I mean, that's like over half of the budget. And I wouldn't want Wilmington Public Schools to feel hurried. I wouldn't want Shawshene Tech to feel hurried. I wouldn't want the board to feel like we didn't have enough time or felt hurried so that we didn't ask adequate questions of either school department. I would ask through you, Madam Chair, if you could just mention my concern. I'm not speaking for the board.
Right.
About scheduling those two together. It's a big ask, if you ask me.
That's a legitimate concern. What do you think about that?
I can certainly speak to that. Beverly Dalton, who is the assistant in the manager's office, does a lot of work trying to get everything scheduled for the finance committee hearings. And that was, believe it or not, the only date during the time frame that both of those, we did not intentionally
Okay.
intend to have them at on the same night. But the scheduling for both of those school administrations was such that they didn't provide us with any other options.
Okay.
In the
unfortunately.
next 6 weeks, both of those teams only have one night available? Is that what you're saying?
The only times that we could find that they would they could meet with the sixth, and Bev did provide them with a lot of different options.
Well, in both of their defenses, they have elected boards that have to review a budget and approve it before it can be brought here, as opposed to the town manager's office. So, like I saw in the town crier, the Wilmington School Committee had just seen its second iteration of Dr. Brand's proposed budget, and they only meet twice a month, and so they have a public process they have to go through.
And Shawshene Tech is not even that far along in their
Right.
budget process
Shawshene
either.
Tech is notoriously even later, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they have to wait until after they get the numbers from DESI about the
Yeah, the way to
school.
split the money up,
Yeah, I mean, you know as well as anyone else
Yeah.
how that works. It's just a
to do the assessment.
yeah, to the assessment, they have to wait till they get DESI's numbers, and therefore, through basically through mid-February, they weren't even going to be on the docket anyway. And then you have the school vacation, and then subsequent to that,
It's gonna be a long night.
we
It
we
is
can
gonna be a long
can certainly.
But last year, we had them both in at the same night.
Yeah.
Wasn't
We,
that
we,
bad?
we used to do it years and years ago, and then we started splitting them out. And,
And-
but it's always in March, the
Hopefully I'll
first.
be wrong. Hopefully I'll be wrong.
Well, last
I
year it
often
wasn't,
am, so,
last year it wasn't too
That's my
bad. I
life.
think it was just about this time last year.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think you know
Thank you.
an hour
Yeah.
apiece.
we weren't doing that intentionally. I just
Yeah.
want folks-
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else to discuss, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I-
Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
See you on Tuesday.